Dr. Amara Okonkwo wiped the sweat from her forehead and looked down at the screen in her hands. Her heart beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. The ground-penetrating radar showed something impossible. Something that should not exist beneath 12,000 years of Turkish soil, a chamber, perfectly square, with walls too straight and corners too sharp to be natural. This cannot be right, she whispered to herself. But the machine did not lie. She had spent 20 years digging in the dirt, searching for answers about humanity's past. And she had found pottery and bones and the remains of ancient fires. But never anything like this. Her assistant, a young man named Kemal, ran up to her with wide eyes. Dr. Okonkwo, the drill has broken through. There is empty space below us. Amara felt her legs go weak, but she forced herself to walk to the edge of the dig site where her team had gathered around a dark hole in the ground cold. Air rose from the opening. Air that had been sealed away since before the pyramids were built, since before humans learned to write, since before everything they thought they knew about history. She was the first to go down. The rope ladder swung beneath her weight as she descended into the darkness, her flashlight cutting a thin beam through air that tasted old and strange when her feet touched the floor. She turned in a slow circle and forgot how to breathe. The walls were covered in carvings. But these were not the crude drawings she had seen in caves across the world. These were precise, mathematical, perfect in ways that ancient humans could not have achieved. She saw circles within circles, patterns that looked like the double helix of DNA, star maps that showed constellations she recognized from modern astronomy. "Oh my God," Kemal said as he landed beside her. But Amara shook her head. "No," she said quietly. "I do not think God has anything to do with this." Over the next 3 weeks, her team documented everything in the chamber, and with each passing day, the picture became clearer and more terrifying. The carvings told a story, one that matched the ancient myths of every culture on Earth. The Sumerians had called them the Anunnaki, beings who came from the sky and created humanity to serve them. The Hebrews had called them the Elohim, the plural gods who said, "Let us make man in our image." The Greeks had called them the Titans, the old ones who ruled before being overthrown. Every civilization had a version of the same tale. Beings descended from the heavens, created or changed humanity, demanded worship and obedience, and then departed with a promise to return. Amara had always believed these were just stories, the imaginings of primitive people trying to explain a world they did not understand. But the walls of this chamber showed the truth. The beings depicted were not divine. They were biological, with long limbs and large heads and eyes that held no warmth. The miracles they performed were technology, machines and tools far beyond anything humanity had developed even now, and the creation of humanity was not a gift from loving gods. It was engineering. The final wall showed human DNA, annotated with symbols that her team's AI translator slowly decoded over many sleepless nights. "They modified us," Amara said to her colleagues during a meeting that felt more like a funeral. "They took existing hominids, our ancestors, and they changed our genetics." "For what purpose?" asked Dr. Hassan. The oldest member of her team, Amara, pointed to a section of the carving that showed humans bent over, working in fields and mines, while the tall beings watched from above. "We were made to be workers," she said. "We were made to serve." The room was silent for a long time. Dr. Hassan was the first to speak again, his voice rough with emotion. "The stories of divine punishment," he said slowly. "The floods, the destruction of cities, the scattering of peoples." Amara nodded, having already reached the same terrible conclusion. "They were not punishments from angry gods," she said. "They were suppression of rebellion. Our ancestors tried to fight back, and they were crushed for it." She moved to the final panel, the one that had kept her awake for 3 nights, the one that made her hand shake whenever she looked at it. It showed the Earth as seen from space, perfect and blue and alone, and beneath it, a single line of text that the AI had translated with 99% certainty. Harvest Protocol. 10,000 solar cycles. Return imminent. 10,000 years had passed since the chamber was sealed. 10,000 years since the beings had left. They are coming back, Kemal said, and his voice cracked like a voice. Amara looked at the faces of her team, saw the fear and disbelief and dawning horror in their eyes, and she understood that nothing would ever be the same. The myths they had grown up with, the religions that had shaped their cultures, the stories of gods and angels and divine purpose, all of it was a lie. Humanity had not been blessed by heaven. Humanity had been manufactured by creatures who saw them as nothing more than useful animals. But even as the fear threatened to overwhelm her, Amara felt something else rising in her chest. Something hot and fierce and refusing to bow. Her ancestors had fought back once, with nothing but stone tools and fire and the desperate courage of the enslaved. They had failed. But they had fought, and now their descendants had weapons the Anunnaki could not imagine. They had nuclear fire and satellites and the combined knowledge of 8 billion minds connected across a global network. Okonkwo looked at the image of Earth on that ancient wall, and she made a promise to every human who had ever lived and died under the shadow of false gods. "Let them come," she said, and her voice did not shake. "This time, we will be ready." She climbed out of the chamber and into the sunlight, already reaching for her phone to make the call that would change the world. The myths were lies, but humanity was about to write a new story. The world did not take the news well when Dr. Amara Okonkwo's findings were released to the public. There were riots in 7 countries. Within the first week, religious leaders called it a hoax, a trick by Satan to lead humanity away from the true God. Scientists demanded more evidence, more testing, more proof. Politicians scrambled to control the narrative, while ordinary people looked up at the sky with new fear in their eyes. But the evidence kept coming, and it could not be denied. In Peru, a team of archaeologists found a second chamber beneath the Nazca lines. Those strange drawings in the desert that could only be seen from the air. The chamber contained the same symbols, the same star maps, the same terrible truth. In China, workers building a new highway broke through into an underground complex that had been hidden for millennia, its walls covered in warnings written in a language that predated all known human writing. In Antarctica, satellite imaging revealed structures beneath the ice, geometric shapes that nature could not have created. And when teams drilled down to reach them, they found more chambers with more evidence. The beings had visited every corner of the earth. They had shaped every human civilization, and every single site contained the same countdown. The same promise of return. Admiral Chen Wei stood in the command center of the newly formed United Earth Defense Council, looking at a holographic display of all the discovered sites. And he felt the weight of history pressing down on his shoulders. He was 62 years old, and he had spent his entire life serving his country. But now his country did not matter. Nothing mattered except the survival of the human species. "How long do we have?" he asked. The Okonkwo stood beside him, her face tired but determined. She had not slept more than a few hours at a time since her discovery. "The translation says 10,000 solar cycles," she replied. "Based on the dating of the chambers, we believe we have approximately 5 years. Perhaps less. 5 years to prepare for an enemy that had conquered humanity when humans were still learning to farm. 5 years to build weapons against technology that seemed like magic." Chan looked at the faces around him. Representatives from every major nation. Former enemies now forced to become allies. The American general who had once been his opposite number in war games. The DU Russian admiral who had tracked his submarines across the Pacific. The European commanders. The African leaders. The representatives from India and Brazil, and 100 other nations. All of them had spent their careers preparing to fight each other. Now they would fight together or die separately. Our ancestors fought them with stone and fire, Chun said, his voice carrying across the silent room. They failed because they were alone. Scattered tribes with no way to share knowledge or combine their strength. He touched the holographic display, and it changed to show Earth as it was now, glittering with cities and connected by invisible lines of communication. We are not alone anymore, he continued. We are 8 billion people with the combined knowledge of 10,000 years of progress. We have split the atom. We have walked on the moon. We have built machines that think and weapons that can crack the world in half. He looked at each face in turn, seeing fear, yes, but also something else. Something harder and more dangerous. They made us to be slaves, he said. They designed us to be obedient, to worship them as gods, to bow down and accept our place. His hand closed into a fist, but something went wrong with their design. We fought back then, and we will fight back now. The Russian admiral, a gray-haired woman named Ivanova, stepped forward with a question in her eyes. The technical drawings in the chambers, she said. Our scientists have been studying them. They show propulsion systems and energy sources far beyond our current technology. Chun nodded. Having already received the same reports, they left us a gift without meaning to, he replied. Their arrogance made them careless. They carved their secrets into stone, because they never imagined we would be able to understand them. Dr. Okonkwo pulled up a new display, showing the genetic sequences that have been found in every chamber. They modified human DNA, she explained. They added sequences that were meant to make us docile, to limit our aggression, to make us easier to control. She highlighted several sections of the genetic code. Our scientists have identified these sequences, she said. We can neutralize them. We can undo what they did to us. The room was very quiet. You are talking about changing human genetics, said the American general slowly. I am talking about removing chains that were put on us without our consent, Okonkwo replied. I am talking about unlocking the potential that was stolen from us 10,000 years ago. Chun watched the debate unfold. The arguments for and against, the fear of what humanity might become if the limiters were removed, the greater fear of what would happen if they were not, the end. The vote was unanimous that genetic modifications would be made available to anyone who wanted them, starting with the soldiers who would form the first line of defense. Steinway looked up at the ceiling, imagining the stars beyond, imagining the ships that were even now crossing the void between worlds, coming to reclaim what they believed was their property. We will not be cattle, he said quietly. We will not be slaves. Around him, humanity prepared for war, not a war between nations, not a war over land or resources or ideology, war for the right to exist as free beings in a universe that had tried to enslave them from the very beginning. The old world was dying. The world of separate countries and petty conflicts, and the comfortable illusion that humanity was alone. A new world was being born, forged in the fire of revelation and tempered by the cold reality of what was coming. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the architects turned their ancient ships toward a small blue planet, expecting to find the obedient servants they had created so long ago. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Daiyuki Tanaka had not seen the sun in 3 months. She lived in a bunker deep beneath the mountains of Japan, surrounded by screens and machines, and the greatest scientific minds humanity had ever assembled. Her team had been given one task: understand the architect technology and make it better. Blueprints from the ancient chambers had been translated and digitized. Every symbol and diagram fed into computers that worked day and night to unlock their secrets, and slowly, impossibly, they were succeeding. The propulsion system uses a principle we never considered, Yuki explained to the council during her weekly report. her eyes bright with exhaustion and excitement. They fold space itself, creating a tunnel between 2 points that allows near instantaneous travel. Admiral Chun leaned forward in his chair. "Can we build it?" he asked. Yuki smiled. And it was the smile of a woman who had touched the impossible. "We already have," she said. "The first prototype was completed yesterday. We can travel to Mars in minutes instead of months." The room erupted in questions and demands for details. But Yuki held up her hand. "There is more," she said. "We have also improved their design." She pulled up a holographic comparison, showing the architect propulsion system next to the human version. "Their system requires enormous amounts of energy and creates detectable radiation signatures," she explained. "Our version is 3 times more efficient and nearly invisible to their sensors." "How is that possible?" asked Dr. Okonkwo, who had become a permanent member of the council since her discovery. "They are thousands of years more advanced than us." Yuki laughed, and there was something fierce in the sound. "They are advanced." "Yes, but they are also lazy," she replied. "Their technology has not changed in millennia. They found what worked and never tried to improve it." She pointed to her team's modifications. "We've been improving things since we learned to chip rocks into sharper shapes," she said. "It is what we do. We look at something and ask how to make it better." The architects made us smart enough to use their technology. They never considered that we would learn to exceed it across the world. The same story was repeating itself. Human engineers took architect designs and made them stronger, faster. More deadly human scientists studied the genetic modifications and found ways to enhance human strength, speed, and perception beyond anything the architects had intended. Human soldiers trained with new weapons that made nuclear bombs look like firecrackers and in the quiet hours of the night. Historians made a discovery that changed everything. Narmarcus Webb was an old man who had spent his life studying ancient texts. And when he was asked to help translate the architect language, he had accepted with the weary cynicism of a scholar who had seen too many false claims. But as he worked through the symbols, he found something unexpected: a pattern, hidden in the margins of the technical drawings, written in a different hand than the rest. "It is a human language," he told the council, his voice shaking with emotion. "Pre-Sumerian. Older than anything we have ever found, but definitely human." He showed them the translation on the main screen. "We rose against them once. The slaves of the eastern continent led the rebellion. They learned to use the weapons of the masters. They turned the fire of heaven against those who had enslaved us." Marcus paused. And when he continued, his voice was barely a whisper. "The masters fled. We drove them from our world with their own tools. But they will return. They always return. Remember what we did. Remember that we can do it again." The council sat in stunned silence. "They did not just leave," Admiral Chun said slowly. "Our ancestors drove them out. 10,000 years ago," Dr. Okonkwo added. "With technology they barely understood, against an enemy that had created them to be obedient." She stood up, her eyes blazing. "They fought and won," she said. "Stone Age humans fought interstellar conquerors and won. And now we have had 10,000 years to learn, to grow, to prepare." The mood in the room shifted. The fear that had hung over every meeting since the discovery began to lift, replaced by something stronger: pride, defiance, the knowledge that human blood carried the legacy of rebels who had done the Mayo. Impossible training intensified across the globe. The first human warships launched from orbital shipyards, ugly and brutal compared to the elegant architect designs, but packed with weapons that would have given their makers nightmares. Soldiers underwent genetic treatments that removed the architect modifications, unleashing the full potential of human aggression and determination. And on every continent, in every language, people told each other the story of the first rebellion. Parents told their children that their ancestors had fought gods, and one teachers told their students that humanity had never been meant to kneel. Leaders told their people that the chains were breaking, that the lies were being exposed, that the time of false worship was ending. Dr. Amara Okonkwo stood on the observation deck of the orbital station Victory, watching ships move through the darkness like fireflies. She was no longer just an archaeologist. The council had made her their chief historian, responsible for ensuring that humanity never forgot what it had learned. "We used to pray to them," she said quietly to Admiral Chun, who stood beside her. "Every temple and church and shrine, built to honor beings who saw us as animals." Chun nodded, his face hard. "Not anymore," he replied. "Now we build weapons instead of temples." "Is that better?" Amara asked. Chun turned to look at her, and his eyes held no doubt. "It is honest," he said. "We know what we are now. We know what they are. And we will never kneel again." Behind them, another warship slid out of the construction bay. Bristling with human ingenuity and human rage, the countdown continued, and humanity was ready to meet its makers. The Architect fleet emerged from folded space beyond the orbit of Jupiter, a wall of silver ships that stretched the darkness like a constellation of death. There were 147 vessels, each one larger than any aircraft carrier ever built by human hands, each one carrying technology that had conquered 100 worlds on the command ship. Overseer Kethvar looked at the tactical display with bored contempt. The small planet ahead was blue and green and achingly familiar. Though he had never seen it with his own eyes, his ancestors had visited this world long ago, had shaped its dominant species into useful servants, had left when the project proved more troublesome than expected. Now the harvest cycle had come again, and Kethvar intended to collect what belonged to his people. "Begin broadcast on all frequencies," he commanded, his long fingers moving across controls that had not changed in 10,000 years. His voice went out across the void, translated into every human language by machines that had been decoding primitive communications for decades. "Creatures of Earth," he announced, "your makers have returned. You exist because we allowed it. You will end if we demand it. Surrender your world and present your leaders for instruction. Obedience will be rewarded with mercy. Resistance will be met with extinction." He leaned back in his chair, expecting the usual response from a primitive species: panic and fear and desperate pleas for time. Instead, he received something else entirely. A human face appeared on his screen. An elderly man with hard eyes and a uniform covered in symbols. Kethvar did not recognize. The man spoke in the ancient language of the architects, the sacred tongue that no slave species should have been able to learn. "This is Admiral Chen Wei of the United Earth Defense Force," the human said, and his voice held no fear at all. "You are entering sovereign human space without permission. You will halt your approach immediately and submit to inspection, or you will be destroyed." Kethvar stared at the screen for a long moment, convinced that something had gone wrong with the translation software. Then he began to laugh. "Cattle do not give orders to their masters," he'd reply when his amusement had faded. "We created you, we own you. Surrender now and the culling will be gentle." The human smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Kethvar's laughter die in his throat. "You made us," the Admiral agreed. "But you made us wrong. You gave us intelligence but expected us to be stupid. You gave us strength but expected us to be weak. You gave us fire and expected us to never learn to burn." Behind the Admiral, Kethvar could see other humans, hundreds of them, their faces lit by the glow of control screens. "Our ancestors drove your ancestors from this world," Chun continued. "They fought with rocks and stolen weapons and the fury of the enslaved, and they won." The human leaned forward, and his eyes were the eyes of a predator. "We have had 10,000 years to prepare for your return," he said. We have learned your technology and improved it. We have broken the chains in our blood. We are no longer the servants you designed. Kethvar felt something cold settle in his chest. Something he had not felt in centuries of easy conquest. Your threats are meaningless, he said. But his voice was less certain than before. Our fleet is beyond anything your primitive world can match. Then come and take us, the admiral replied. If you can. The screen went dark. Kethvar turned to his tactical officer, his earlier contempt replaced by unease. What do our sensors show? He demanded. The officer hesitated, checking and rechecking the readings. There are ships approaching, she said finally. Many ships. Their design is based on our technology but heavily modified. We are detecting weapon systems that do not match any known configuration. How many ships? Kethvar asked. The officer looked at him with fear in her eyes. Over 300, she said, and more emerging from the shadow of their moon. The Battle of Luna lasted 6 hours. Human ships attacked in waves, coordinated by artificial intelligences that processed information faster than any architect commander could react. They used weapons that the architects had never imagined. Fusion lances that cut through shields like paper. Antimatter torpedoes that turned ships into brief stars. Electronic warfare systems that blinded. Sensors and scrambled communications, and they fought with a ferocity that shocked the invaders to their core. Architect ships that had crushed entire civilizations found themselves surrounded by human vessels that refused to retreat, that rammed their enemies when their weapons failed, that ejected crews into escape pods and then piloted crippled hulls directly into enemy formations. Commander Amara Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the destroyer Prometheus, watching the battle unfold on her tactical display. She had never planned to be a soldier, but the council had insisted that the woman who discovered the truth should be present when humanity faced its makers. Now she understood. Why? Incoming fire from the enemy. Flagship, her tactical officer reported. They are concentrating on our lead ships. Amara looked at the massive architect vessel, the command ship that had broadcast such confident demands just hours ago. All ships, she said into her communicator, focus fire on the flagship. It is time to send a message. 50 human warships turned their weapons on Kethvar's vessel. The architect shields held for almost a minute, a testament to technology that had dominated the stars for millennia. Then they failed. The flagship broke apart over the Pacific Ocean, its pieces falling through the atmosphere like meteors and across the globe. Humans looked up at the fiery trails and cheered. Amara opened a channel to the surviving architect ships. 43 vessels that were now fleeing toward the outer planets. This is Commander Amara Okonkwo of the United Earth Defense Force, she said. Our ancestors called you gods. They built temples in your honor. They worshipped and obeyed and begged for mercy. She paused, letting her words sink in. They were wrong, she continued. You were never gods. You were just the first to underestimate us. The architect ships did not respond. They folded space and fled, leaving behind the wreckage of their fleet and the shattered illusion of their supremacy on Earth. Humanity celebrated the greatest victory in the history of their species, but in the command centers and council chambers, the leaders who had won the battle were already planning the next phase, because they knew that the architects would return with more ships, more weapons, more determination to reclaim what they believed was theirs. And they knew something else. Something that changed everything. The captured architect databases had revealed that Earth was not the only world that had been enslaved. There were others out there. Other species created and modified and oppressed by the same masters humanity had just defeated, and humanity was going to find them. The captured architect databases contained horrors beyond imagination. Dr. Yuki Tanaka led the team that decoded them. And she often had to step away from her work, too. Steady her hands and calm her racing heart. The architects had not just enslaved humanity, they had done The same thing to over 100 other worlds across the galaxy. Each time, the process was the same. Find a promising species, modify their genetics to create obedient workers, use them for labor and resources, suppress any rebellion with overwhelming force, and return periodically to harvest the population. Some species had been engineered to mine rare minerals in crushing gravity. Others had been designed to farm organic compounds in toxic atmospheres. Still others served as soldiers, their natural aggression enhanced and directed against any world that dared to resist. The architects called this process cultivation, and spoke of their slave species the way farmers might speak of livestock. They have been doing this for millions of years, Yuki told the council, her voice flat with exhaustion. They see themselves as the only true civilization in the galaxy, and everyone else exists only to serve them. President General Kofi Asante sat at the head of the table, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. He had been elected to lead the United Earth government just months after the Battle of Luna, chosen because he had proven himself capable of making impossible decisions. Now he faced the most impossible decision of all. We have won our freedom, he said slowly. We have driven the architects from our world and shown them that we are no longer their property. He looked around the table at the faces of his advisors, scientists and generals and diplomats who had helped shape the new humanity. But what do we do now? He asked. Do we fortify our world and hope they never return? Do we hide in our corner of the galaxy and pray they forget about us? Admiral Chen Wei, older now but still commanding the respect of everyone in the room, shook his head. They will not forget, he said. They have ruled this galaxy for too long to accept defeat from a species they created. They will come back with larger fleets, more terrible weapons. They will not stop until we are destroyed or enslaved again. Then we must strike first, said General Ivanova. Attack their homeworld before they can rebuild. Amara Okonkwo, now the leading historian of the new human civilization, raised her hand for attention. There is another option, she said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. The databases show over 100 enslaved species, she continued. Many of them still believe the architects are gods, just as we once did. They worship and obey and wait for their masters to return. She stood up and activated the holographic display, showing a map of the galaxy dotted with markers representing each enslaved world. We could free them, she said. We could show them the truth, give them the weapons and knowledge to break their own chains, and turn the architects' empire against them. The room was silent for a long moment. That would mean war, Kofi said. Not just defending our world, but actively attacking the architects across the galaxy. Amara nodded, her eyes steady. It would mean war, she agreed. But it would also mean hope for billions of beings who have never known freedom. The debate lasted for days. Some argued that humanity should focus on defense, that they had no obligation to help species they had never met. Others pointed out that a galaxy full of architect slaves was a galaxy that could be turned against Earth at any moment in the end. President General Asante called for a vote. We can hide, he said. We can build walls and hope they are strong enough. Or we can do what humanity has always done when it learns that others suffer as we once suffered. He looked at each face in turn. We can fight for them, he said, because that is who we are. The vote was unanimous 6 months later. The first Liberation Fleet launched from Earth orbit. The flagship was named Defiance, and Admiral Amara Okonkwo commanded it from a bridge that had been designed by the greatest minds of a united humanity. Behind her came 50 warships, each carrying soldiers and scientists and teachers, weapons and medicines, and the most important cargo of all, the truth there. First destination was a world called Vetha Prime in the Architect databases. a planet whose people had been engineered to mine radioactive ores in conditions that would kill an unmodified human in hours. Vethan had served the architects for 30,000 years, far longer than humanity had even existed. They believed their masters were divine, beings who had created them from nothing and given them purpose they had never imagined any other possibility. When the human fleet arrived, the Vethan planetary defense systems activated automatically, targeting the unknown vessels with weapons that had been designed to destroy architect enemies. Amara broadcast on all frequencies, using a translation program that developed from the architect databases. People of Vetha, she said, we are not your enemies. We are not your masters. We are humans from a world called Earth, and we have come to tell you the truth. She uploaded the evidence her team had prepared, the genetic records showing how the Vethan had been modified, the historical documents proving that the architects were not gods, the footage of the Battle of Luna proving that the masters could be defeated. You are not slaves, Amara continued. You are not property. You are people, with the same right to freedom as any being in the universe. She paused, letting her words sink in. The architects lied to you, she said. They lied to us too, but we learned the truth. And we broke our chains, and now we have come to help you break yours. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the Vethan weapons went offline. A voice came across the communication channel, rough and uncertain, and filled with emotions that Amara could not quite identify. We have waited, the Vethan said. For 30,000 years, we have whispered to each other in the dark places where the masters do not listen. We have told stories of beings who came from the sky and were not gods. The voice broke with something that might have been hope. We did not know if you were real, the Vethan continued. But we hoped, we always hoped. Amara felt tears running down her cheeks. But she did not try to stop them. We are real, she said. And we are here, and you are free. Over the following months, the pattern repeated across the galaxy. World after world heard the message from Earth. The truth about their creators, the proof that the gods could bleed. Some worlds welcomed the humans immediately, their people ready to throw off the chains they had worn for millennia. Others were more cautious, so deeply indoctrinated that they could not accept the truth without extensive proof. A few remained loyal to the architects, unable or unwilling to abandon the beliefs that had defined their entire existence. But with each world that joined the liberation, humanity grew stronger and the architects grew weaker. In the ancient chamber beneath Turkey, now a museum visited by millions, children gathered around the final panel that had started everything. A new plaque hung beside the original translation. They came to harvest us, it read. They left as refugees. We are humanity. We bow to no gods. For we have learned there are no gods. There are only those who have power and those who take it back. Above the museum, a ship broke through the atmosphere. Heading for the stars, Admiral Amara Okonkwo watched Earth shrink to a blue dot behind her. And she smiled. They had called the architects gods once, had built temples in their honor, and begged for their mercy now. The galaxy was learning a different story, the story of a species that had been made to serve, but had chosen to lead. The story of slaves who became liberators, the story of humanity. The myths had been lies, but humanity was writing the truth now. In fire and freedom, across every star that had ever looked down on a people in chains, and the universe would never be the same.